So, as the conflict in Yemen enters its seventh year, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs estimates that it's caused the deaths of nearly 250,000 people. Millions of Yemenis continue to face the largest humanitarian crisis in the world, with more than half the population facing acute levels of food insecurity. Yemen depends on imports for almost all of its food and essential commodities, and the collapse of its currency had led to skyrocketing food and other commodity prices and reduced households' purchasing power. Millions of people can't afford to meet their basic needs. And obviously, with the impact of COVID, things have just gotten like so much worse. So imagine what's happening in Yemen right now, and imagine COVID then entering the scene and the effect that that's had on it. And then the unlawful attacks that are happening consistently all the time. Children and armed conflict. I think children is a massive one to talk about, but more than 20.7 million Yemenis are in dire need of humanitarian assistance or protection, and these are children we're talking about. In 2021, Save the Children reported that between 2018 and 2020, a quarter of all civilian casualties were children. And that, I think that is the most horrific part of all of this, is like, these are children getting caught up in this crisis. And obviously I'm going to talk about the effects of like how I call out the English government as well for their part in this. They know exactly what they're doing when they're selling these weapons to Saudi, and they know exactly who Saudi are targeting and how indiscriminately they're targeting. But yeah, more than 1.5 million of Yemen's 4 million displaced people are children, and hundreds of thousands of children have become migrants or sought asylum abroad. In 2021, children were facing the highest levels of severe acute malnutrition recorded in Yemen since the escalation of the conflict in 2015, with 2.3 million children acutely malnourished and nearly 400,000 children under 5 years old at imminent risk of death. That should not be a statistic that we're reading in 2021, that 400,000 children under 5 years of age are at imminent risk of death from acute malnutrition because of this humanitarian crisis on the back of some political war. This is not on. And I don't know why the world is silent on this. I don't understand why more people are not speaking out. Like, I see the ads on YouTube. You see it, like, even mainstream media has obviously forgotten about this. That's why Armin is entirely right. We need to keep doing this a lot. But I think half the reason why I stopped looking into Yemen for a while is because of how like emotionally jarring this entire conflict is. The images that come out of here, the children, the pictures that you see, you just feel so helpless. Like, what can you do besides, this is a start that we're talking about it, but what can you do? So there's landmines. There's a whole issue with landmines, which have approximately caused 9,000 civilian casualties since the beginning of the conflict. And then obviously wherever there's just not a good legal judiciary and human rights respected, you're going to have arbitrary detentions, torture, and enforced disappearances. These are all simultaneously making up part and parcel of this conflict. Blocking and impeding humanitarian access, women's rights. But what I really wanted to talk about and obviously sexual orientation and gender identity is also taking a hit. This is one thing I think is talked about way less frequently than it should. But abuses against migrants, because I think this is a situation where a minority within a minority comes into play. But there are scores of African migrants who died at a detention center in Sana'a in March 2021 after Houthi security forces launched unidentified projectiles into the center, causing a fire. So, I mean, this is just mass violence and bloodshed across the board here. And there's African migrants who went to Yemen to try and experience a better life, and that's what ended up happening to them. But this is when I really want to call out these governments, for example, the British government specifically, but the key international actors involved in this. So despite years of documentation of unlawful attacks, the US, the UK, France, Canada, Spain, Germany, Australia, and other countries continue to license the sale of weapons and military equipment to Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and other coalition members. Iran continued to support Houthi forces militarily. Italy Italy did a good move when they blocked arms sales to Saudi Arabia and the UAE in January 2021 over concerns that weapons could be used against civilians, but later eased restrictions amid diplomatic tensions. The GEE, the UN panel of experts on Yemen, and other right groups reiterated their call for countries to address the lack of accountability for serious crimes, including probable war crimes committed in Yemen. That has a direct link back to MBS, who should be tried for these war crimes, amongst a myriad of other things that we've discussed today. Under pressure from Saudi Arabia and the UAE, members of the UN Human Rights Council narrowly voted to end the GEE's mandate in October. More than 36 states at the UN General Assembly subsequently called for the international community to actively explore further alternative mechanisms to monitor the human rights situation in Yemen and ensure accountability. So again, I mean, it's clear as day. There is so much proof of what Saudi Arabia is doing and using these weapons for. But again, these companies are benefiting so much. These security companies, these weapon companies, these armament companies, the profit is just way too good for these people to put human rights at the same kind of level. We learned a massive lesson, but Armin was right. We need to keep talking about this, but also call out these governments. Like, your country is just as involved as my country. We know exactly what they're doing. And you've got to call them out, because they are, by and large, taking part in one of the worst humanitarian crises that we're experiencing today. And it's a direct result of them seeing dollar signs and money. That's all it is.
Yeah, well, that was very comprehensive.
Thank you.
There was this. Well, I don't need to keep talking about. We'll obviously keep bringing you up to date with this human catastrophe that's been taking place by MBS's design.
If you like these videos and want to support me in my activism, then you can support me on Patreon or PayPal. Stay free, everyone.